They told me a story. They showed me headlines, statistics, and grainy footage. They taught me who to fear, who the villain was. And like most people, I believed them. But one journey, one moment, changed everything. What if I told you the people they called terrorists were the ones who taught me what it truly means to be human? What if behind the rubble, the smoke, and the silence, I found something the world never showed me? Faith that doesn't crack, unity that doesn't fold, and a light so powerful it made me question everything I thought I knew about truth, about strength, and about God. This isn't just a speech, it's a wake-up call. Stay with me until the end, and I promise you'll never see the world the same way again. The first keynote, Western media bias, is a powerful factor shaping global perception about the Palestinian people. For decades, the mainstream narrative, especially in the West, has painted Palestinians as aggressors, militants, or terrorists. But this image is far from the truth. It is a carefully constructed viewpoint driven by selective reporting, political alliances, and a deep-rooted misunderstanding of the conflict's origins and realities. News outlets often focus on rocket fire from Gaza or clashes between youth and Israeli soldiers, but they rarely give equal weight to the conditions that provoke these reactions. Decades of occupation, illegal settlements, checkpoints, and a strangling blockade. What the audience usually doesn't see are the homes demolished without warning. They don't see the mothers burying their children. They don't see the daily humiliation at military checkpoints, the water and electricity cuts, or the way Palestinian farmers are pushed off their land. When a Palestinian defends his home, it is branded as terrorism. When an Israeli soldier fires on unarmed civilians, it is called security enforcement. This double standard is at the heart of media bias. The framing of stories matters. Using terms like retaliation when Israel strikes, but terror attack when Palestinians respond, subtly teaches the audience who to sympathize with and who to fear. Furthermore, the voices of Palestinians themselves are rarely heard in Western media. Their side of the story is filtered, edited, or ignored altogether. Instead, spokespeople from powerful nations or military officials are invited to justify their actions, while Palestinian grief is depersonalized. The human side of their suffering, the tears, the prayers, the dreams, is often erased. This imbalance contributes to a dangerous cycle where violence against Palestinians becomes normalized and any resistance from them is condemned as extremism. The result is a public that has been conditioned to view the oppressed as the threat. It creates a mental distance where empathy is denied and judgment is swift. Even those who consider themselves educated or open-minded often carry unconscious biases instilled by the repetition of one-sided narratives. They ask, why don't they just stop fighting? Without understanding that for many Palestinians, survival itself is a form of resistance. When someone finally breaks out of this bubble and sees the reality with their own eyes, the contrast is shocking. The truth that emerges from the ground level is not one of hatred, but of resilience, faith, and a longing for justice. The media may have created a villain, but the world is beginning to see the human story behind the headlines. The second keynote, First-hand reality versus propaganda, reveals the profound gap between what people are told about Palestine and what actually exists on the ground. It's one thing to sit in a living room thousands of miles away watching the news anchor describe conflict in the Middle East. It's another thing entirely to walk the streets of Gaza, to see the bullet holes in school walls, to hear the distant hum of drones overhead as children laugh and play in narrow alleyways. What is portrayed in the media often lacks depth, humanity, and truth. It shows conflict stripped of context. Headlines that reduce a people's suffering to brief statistics or sensational images, never explaining the everyday struggle that defines life under occupation. Propaganda works by repetition and omission. The repeated labeling of Palestinians as aggressors becomes normal, while the reasons behind their resistance are omitted. The countless acts of kindness, sacrifice, and endurance by ordinary Palestinians are not considered newsworthy. Instead, an isolated act of violence is replayed, dissected, and used to justify collective punishment. But when someone travels to Palestine, sees the people up close, and speaks with them, not about politics, but about life, it changes everything. You begin to realize that these are families just trying to live. Fathers who want their children to grow up safe. Mothers who tuck their kids in at night hoping the house doesn't shake from an airstrike. Teenagers who dream of careers, love, and freedom like anyone else in the world. What breaks the illusion of propaganda is the undeniable humanity of the people. You meet someone who lost a brother, and instead of rage, they offer you tea. You watch a child draw the Dome of the Rock in bright colors, not tanks or guns. You visit a market where, despite poverty, vendors greet you with smiles and generosity. These are not the images the world is shown, and once you witness them, it becomes impossible to go back to believing the one-sided narrative. The disconnect between the media image and the lived reality becomes even more clear when you see the fear, not in the soldiers, but in the eyes of the occupied. When you realize the ones labeled dangerous are the ones digging their neighbors out of rubble, that's when the lie of propaganda crumbles, because truth has a different weight when it's standing right in front of you. When you see the struggle not as a headline, but in the trembling hands of an old man holding a photo of his destroyed home, you understand that reality can't be edited and humanity can't be erased. The unbreakable spirit of the Palestinian people is something that defies explanation until it's witnessed firsthand. It's not about politics or conflict anymore. It becomes about resilience, about a level of strength that refuses to die, even when everything around is falling apart. In a place where life is marked by constant checkpoints, curfews, surveillance, and the looming threat of violence, the people don't just survive, they live. They laugh, they love, they raise families, they continue to hold on to hope in a situation where most would give in to despair. That kind of strength doesn't come from comfort or privilege. It comes from generations of endurance, from being tested every single day and still choosing dignity. You walk through the streets of Hebron, Nablus, or Gaza, and you see children kicking a ball near piles of rubble. You hear the call to prayer echo through a city that just hours before was shaken by airstrikes. People still open their shops, still sweep their porches, still plant olive trees, knowing full well that a bulldozer might rip them out the next day, but they do it anyway. That's not just routine, that's resistance. That's faith turned into daily action. It's not loud or dramatic, but it's powerful beyond words. Even under occupation, there is a deep sense of hospitality and pride that doesn't fade. Strangers are welcomed like family. Food is offered with joy, even when there's barely enough. There is an elegance in how Palestinians carry themselves, a refusal to let injustice take away their identity. They dance at weddings with the same passion as they march in protests. They teach their children poetry alongside survival skills. Their culture thrives, their traditions endure, and their faith remains intact. That's the kind of spirit that no amount of oppression can erase. It's easy to break things, homes, cities, bodies, but breaking the soul of a people, that's a different battle. And in Palestine, the soul is still standing. In fact, it's rising. Every martyr is honored not with revenge, but remembrance. Every loss is turned into a story that the next generation learns by heart. Even the scars are worn with pride, not because they love pain, but because they love life enough to fight for it. The unbreakable spirit of Palestinians isn't about being fearless. It's about choosing courage every single day, even in the face of fear. That kind of strength is not just inspiring, it's transformative. It makes you question your own limits, your own faith, and what it really means to stand for something greater than yourself. Faith under fire is not just a phrase, it's a lived reality in Palestine. It's watching people bow their heads in prayer while drones hover overhead. It's seeing a man recite verses from the Quran as his home burns behind him. It's witnessing mothers whispering supplications as they wrap their children in blankets, unsure if they'll survive the night. In a place where everything is uncertain, where the future is a question mark and the past is filled with loss, faith becomes the one thing that remains untouched. It becomes the anchor in a sea of chaos, the light in the deepest darkness. And when you see that kind of faith, not in a comfortable mosque or a peaceful retreat, but in the middle of destruction, it changes how you understand religion. There's a difference between believing in God when life is good and holding on to that belief when everything around you says otherwise. Palestinians have mastered that difference. They are not just practicing Islam, they are embodying it. Fasting with no food in the house, giving zakat when they themselves are in need, saying alhamdulillah not out of habit but out of conviction. When you ask them how they endure, they don't talk about politics. They talk about patience, sabr. They talk about how Prophet Muhammad endured hardship and how faith is not supposed to be easy. You realize in those conversations that their Islam is not theoretical. It's real. It's in their breath, in their footsteps, in their resistance to being dehumanized. What strikes you most is the calmness they carry, not because they're numb or unaware, but because they trust in something higher. They believe that justice belongs to God, that every injustice in this world is a test, not a final judgment. You hear it in the way they say, inshallah, with hope, even after loss. You see it in the way they keep their Quran beside their bed, even when that bed is a pile of rubble. That kind of faith is not inherited, it's earned. It's built in fire, tested by grief, and purified by struggle. Seeing faith under fire in Palestine forces you to confront your own relationship with belief. It makes you wonder if you've ever truly relied on God. It makes you ask if you've ever prayed like everything depended on it. Because over there, every breath is a prayer. Every act of survival is an act of worship. And in that realization, you find something sacred, something that moves beyond religion and touches the very core of what it means to be human. The power of brotherhood and unity in Palestine is something the world rarely talks about. But once you witness it, it leaves a permanent mark on your heart. In a land where hardship is a daily reality, where homes are destroyed and lives are constantly threatened, you might expect people to be isolated, bitter, or closed off. But what you actually find is the opposite. You see neighbors taking care of each other like family. You see strangers sharing food, shelter, and stories without hesitation. In moments of loss, the entire community shows up, not just to grieve, but to support, to lift, to hold one another up. There's no such thing as suffering alone, because in Palestine, pain is shared, and so is hope. You walk through a narrow street in a refugee camp and someone you've never met calls you in for tea, They don't ask where you're from, what your background is, or whether you're Muslim. They ask if you're okay. They ask if you've eaten. And once you sit down with them, you realize this isn't an exception, it's a way of life. Palestinians live with an open door mentality. They believe in the value of togetherness, in the blessing of serving others, especially in the worst of time. Their unity isn't born out of comfort, it's forged through decades of shared struggle. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity, and it's sacred. When there's a wedding, everyone is invited. When there's a funeral, the whole town mourns. You'll see young people helping the elderly cross rubble-filled streets, and children giving their only toy to comfort a crying guest. It's a society that values the idea that all Muslims are one body, and when one part hurts, the whole body feels the pain. This isn't just a religious concept for them. It's how they live every day. You'll hear phrases like, "We are one hand," or "We carry each other," not as slogans, but as truths. Their unity is their strength. It's how they resist. It's how they heal. In a world that often feels divided by race, politics, and money, Palestine teaches something different. It teaches that when you remove the distractions, what matters most is connection. Brotherhood here isn't a handshake. It's a bond formed in the fire of suffering and cooled by compassion. This sense of togetherness is powerful because it cannot be taken away, no matter how many walls are built or how many bombs fall. It's a reminder that in the face of injustice, unity is not just survival, it's a form of defiance. Islam as a beacon in darkness is something that becomes crystal clear when you observe the lives of Palestinians up close. In a land where basic rights are stripped away, where fear is constant and destruction can strike at any moment, what keeps people grounded isn't wealth, power, or politics. It's faith, and not just any kind of faith, but a deep, unwavering connection to Islam that shapes how they think, act, and endure. You start to see Islam not as a religion of rituals, but as a complete way of life that offers purpose, identity, and clarity, even in the most chaotic situations. The discipline, the patience, the forgiveness, the constant remembrance of Allah. All of it becomes a source of light in a place where so much has been taken away. You begin to understand why they pray with such devotion, why the Quran is recited in every household, why Bismillah is said before lifting even a cup of water. It's because Islam gives structure when the world around them is in ruins. It's a guide, a protector, a source of strength that no bullet or bomb can destroy. It tells them they are not alone, that their suffering has meaning, and that justice belongs to God, even if the world turns a blind eye. In that faith, they find peace. And it's not a shallow peace, it's a peace built through fire, a peace earned through struggle, rooted in a belief that what is written will come to pass, and that no oppressor can outright the decree of the Creator. What truly moves you is seeing how Islam is practiced in its purest form here. It's not for show, not something people turn to only when life is good. It's there in the hardest moments, in the silence after an airstrike, in the eyes of a child looking for comfort, in the hands raised high in dua during the night. Islam becomes the light that guides decisions, the compass that gives people moral clarity when the world is morally bankrupt. And when you see that light shining in places most would consider hopeless, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about faith, about strength, about the human spirit. You realize Islam isn't what the media says it is. It's not a threat. It's not a slogan. It's a lifeline. And in Palestine, that lifeline has become the heartbeat of a people who refuse to let darkness define them. They walk through fire with the words of God on their tongues, and no matter how much they lose, they never lose their light. They called Palestinians terrorists. That's what the headline said. That's what the news repeated. That's what I believed until I saw the truth with my own eyes. What I witnessed wasn't terror, it was humanity, it was struggle, it was sacrifice. It was the kind of faith that doesn't break under pressure, it gets stronger. I saw people who had every reason to hate, choosing instead to hold on to dignity, unity, and mercy. I saw Islam not as a theory, not as a label, but as a living, breathing force of resilience. It wasn't destruction that made me question everything I thought I knew. It was the light I saw rising from it. In their courage, I found clarity. In their worship, I found wisdom. And in their truth, I found my own. I didn't become Muslim because of propaganda. I became Muslim because of the people the world taught me to fear, the ones who, through their pain, introduced me to real strength, real peace, and a real connection to God. Thank you for listening with an open heart. May the truth always guide you, and may your path be filled with light, clarity, and courage, just like the people who inspired this story. Good luck on your journey, wherever it takes you. Stay strong, stay awake, and never stop seeking truth. Peace be upon you.